This is said to be the place where Bram Stoker got the inspiration and the name for Dracula's first victim. Now, a few people say that this coach and horses, that the horses are headless. It's certainly quite a gripping, gruesome image. Some people say that you can still hear the nun screaming, because she was literally screaming until she lost consciousness and died. The graveyard has a resident cat. I've been running around for the last few hours trying to find the switch for the Whitby Abbey illuminations. No such luck. The things I do for you guys. Hello everyone, it's Halloween week, and where better to visit during Halloween in the UK than the little fishing town of Whitby, which allegedly is the most gothic city in the UK. It's the dead of night and there's no one around, and I'm going to touch on what makes this tiny fishing town a hotspot for gothic inspiration. For those of you who know, Bram Stoker visited here, and this whole place inspired a lot of the Dracula movie, and people come here from all over the world to see the iconic hotspots that made the novel what it is today. I'm going to take you to some of those hotspots, and I'm also going to share some of the ghost stories of Whitby, because there are a lot of resident ghosts in Whitby. Far too many for such a tiny little town, but I'm going to see if I bump into anything spooky in the dead of night. I'm standing a few steps up on the 199 stairs that lead to St Mary's Church. Now, this church is iconic. It sits on the hilltop overlooking the whole of the bay. So I think that's a brilliant place to start this video. I have to say that there is something very haunting and very eerie about Whitby. Now, in all fairness, it's 4 in the morning and anywhere's a little bit spooky at that time of night. There's something very eerie about Whitby. As you might be able to hear, you can hear the waves lashing up against the shore, and otherwise, it's very, very quiet, very, very sombre, and that haunting sound kind of follows you around the town. There are a few ghost stories linked to the fishermen and the seamen that came into the little port below, but I'm going to touch upon that a little later on. So, 199 steps that lead to the church. I've made it up the 199 steps. Now, these steps are very highly documented, and the number of them always crops up. And I wonder why they didn't make it to 200. Anyway, when you read that, 199 steps sounds like an eternity, but actually for someone who's fairly fit and healthy, it's just a few steps up to the church. So, if you look around, you will see the iconic St Mary's Church behind me, and this is a very quintessentially British Gothic style graveyard, and it's easy to see why this would have been such a great inspiration for Bram Stoker, because I could easily imagine a team of vampires sneaking up on me and biting my neck. This is where we separate fact from fiction, or some people might believe that ghost stories are fictional, but I don't, and there are a few very spooky ghost stories attached to St Mary's churchyard. If you read reports online, there are various different twists and turns that this story will take, but the gist of it is that many people have seen a coach with horses disappear into the distance when it gets to the church door. Now, a few people say that this coach and horses, that the horses are headless. I don't know why that might be, but it's certainly quite a gripping, gruesome image. And I wonder how I'd feel if I saw a coach with headless horses in the dead of night come towards me. A lot of people have said that the coach and horses will look like it's coming straight for them, and as soon as it gets to them, it disappears into the night. Now, that is a beautiful ghost story and very visual, and it's easy to see why this town inspires so many tales, fictional or otherwise. For those of you who have read the Dracula novels, you will know that one of Dracula's first victims was Swales. Now, this is actually gravestone of someone called William Swales, a real person, not a fictional person, but this is said to be the place where Bram Stoker got the inspiration and the name for Dracula's first victim. He didn't have to look very far for this inspiration, because this is the second tombstone you will come across when you come into the graveyard. So inspiration found him very quickly. This tombstone is always surrounded by a group of tourists during the day, but in the dead of night, it's just me and the resting vampires and spirits that are lurking amongst us. As you walk towards the door of St Mary's, that eerie sound of the waves lashing against the harbour wall completely disappears, and you are actually in a really strange state where it's just you. You can hear noises of traffic in the far distance, but it's very tranquil, it's very eerie, and you could just spend hours sitting here writing, coming up with 1,000,001 ideas. I could be the next Bram Stoker. I could be sitting here in the dead of night writing my next novel. Will it feature witches, vampires, ghosts, ghoulies? But whatever it may hold, it's surely going to be inspired by the beautiful surroundings around me. It does feel like this is a place where Dracula would hang out and search his victims. Now, rumour has it that there are a few real-life vampires existing in Whitby. There is a big festival twice a year to celebrate dark, creepy culture, creepy fashion, and everything that is gothic. It's easy to see why anyone who loves weird and wonderful stories would be drawn to the heights of Whitby Church. And there is one big, iconic structure, in fact, probably the most iconic structure or building in the whole of Whitby, which I have not even mentioned yet, and that is Whitby Abbey. Now, it's pitch black at the moment, so you can barely see the Abbey ruins, but as the sun comes up, I might take you a little bit closer to show you what the Abbey is actually like now. This is in a, don't want to use the word derelict, but it's in a derelict state. You can actually visit the Abbey during the day and walk around the ruins, and it is a tourist attraction now. But there is one very dark and gruesome ghost story attached to the Abbey. Now, I'm in a graveyard in the dead of night. It seems like an ideal, perfect time to tell you that ghost story, because by the time I get to the Abbey, because you actually can't see it in the dark, the setting won't be quite as fitting. The ghost story goes that when the Abbey was a convent and had nuns living there, there was a young nun who fell in love with a man and subsequently broke her vow of chastity. This got found out, and as a punishment, all of the nuns locked her inside the Abbey walls, bricked her up and left her to die. Some people say that you can still hear the nun screaming because she was literally screaming until she lost consciousness and died. I would love to see the apparition of this nun today, and I will keep my fingers crossed and my channels open, but it's still a beautiful tale that is associated quite heavily with the haunted history of Whitby Abbey. Obviously, this is a ghost story, and when it comes to verifying ghost stories, it's a little bit of a grey area. But I'm assuming that there was actually a nun who did get bricked up inside the abbey. Whether you can see her still today in a ghostly apparition, that is down to the individual and what they sense and what they see. It appears I'm not alone after all. The graveyard has a resident cat. Now, I believe, and some of you may also believe this, but animals can sense paranormal activity, and often they sense it before humans. So the cat has now vanished, and whether that's because he's seen an apparition or not, I don't know. But sometimes animals sense paranormal activity like humans. When I was in Nevada State Prison, I experienced something very weird. At the exact moment I saw an apparition, a rat ran up out of the floor and right across the room, which scared me more than the apparition, to be honest, because I didn't know what on earth it was. But it is true that animals sense things in the same way that humans do. So that cat has got the hell out of here, and I'm wondering why. There's a few more ghost stories of Whitby that I need to touch upon. The infamous Oyster Man. Now, I think there's actually a statue of this Oyster Man in the town centre, but there is a ghost story attached to the Oyster Man of Whitby. Now, this man, he was an oyster seller. He used to go round the streets of Whitby calling out, asking people to buy his oysters, because obviously he'd come off his ship, he'd worked hard to capture this beautiful seafood, and his job was to sell it to anyone who would listen. So he would walk up and down the streets in the dead of night trying to sell his oysters. Now, one night he was walking past a pub and he was trying to sell his oysters, and someone heckled him, or there was a bit of a kerfuffle, a bit of a scuffle, and subsequently this led to a fight. The man who was taking the mickey out of the Oyster Man grabbed him by the neck, and the Oyster Man pulled out his flick knife and slit this man's throat. The Oyster Man wasn't the victim of this crime, but he was so harrowed by his actions that a few years later, because he couldn't forgive himself for this horrendous crime, it is believed that he committed suicide, and his spirit still walks up and down the town shouting for people to buy his oysters, like he's trapped in his life after life. And that is the fascinating tale of the Whitby Oyster Man. There's also a very haunted lighthouse behind me, between the tombstones, and I know you can't see what I'm talking about. That is the iconic Whitby Abbey. Now, I've been running around for the last few hours trying to find the switch for the Whitby Abbey illuminations. No such luck. The things I do for you guys. So sadly, the Abbey is not illuminated, and I failed in my mission. But I'm hoping as the sun rises, I'll be able to show you a little bit more of that iconic structure. The thing I love about St Mary's Church is that they floodlight the tombstones, they floodlight the church, and there is no gates or doors. So if you want to come around in the dead of night to pay your respects for a loved one, to hang out under the moon waiting for a vampire, then there is nothing to stop you wandering around the church and soaking in the atmosphere that Dracula made famous. I've just realised that in this video I have probably said the word Dracula multiple times, so I want to touch on the spirit and the essence of vampires. Now, vampires are creatures that are hugely glamorized. I mean, you have things like the Twilight Saga, which sees these glamorous vampires, romantic creatures of the night who have eternal youth and eternal lasting energy. And I feel that's kind of an interesting prospect. You know, you have the image of the blood sucking, which is all a bit but they are highly romanticized, even though by textbook they are killers, which is a fascinating conundrum. I think the visual aesthetic of a vampire with the like fangs and the dark features and the mystery is the stuff great books are made of. Hence why Bram Stoker has such a success with Dracula. Now, when I went to Romania, obviously they have Dracula's castle, they have the real life Dracula. It's said that Bram Stoker actually learnt about the legacy of Vlad Tepes while he was in Whitby, and he created a fictional version of the real life Dracula. Now, if you want to watch the video of me exploring Romania and going to Dracula's birthplace, then that's also in my channel, and that was a kind of very fun, quirky homage to Dracula, because Dracula brings in a lot of tourism to Romania and Sighisoara, and Dracula obviously brings quite a lot of tourism to Whitby. And it's Halloween season, it's spooky season, and I had a little bit of time walking through the town centre yesterday. And to say I was disappointed is probably a little bit harsh, but I really expected this town to be Halloweened to the max. I expected this to be a gothic paradise for Halloween lovers, and it was a little bit disappointing, you know. I just come back from America, and as you know, in America, they do the whole hog. You know, people illuminate their gardens, and there's a million and one things you can do to celebrate Halloween. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit feeble, so I wanted more. I wanted to see more pumpkins. I wanted to see more skeletons. I wanted to see more Draculas. In fact, there was actually a mass gathering of Draculas, or people dressed up as Dracula here once, but not today, sadly. Although if they did kind of march through the graveyard right now, I would be slightly scared. But yeah, there you go. Dracula is alive and well in Whitby, and I feel like I've touched on the ghosts of Whitby. I have given you a little bit of insight into the top ghost stories. I want to try and take you to a few of the other hotspots. I want to show you the lighthouse and talk about why that may be haunted as well. But I'm kind of liking it here. I feel quite comfortable. I feel like I could ramble on for quite a long time, which is probably quite disturbing, but it's very strange, isn't it, how you can feel so alive when you're surrounded by death. And death is obviously a sad and tragic thing, and it happens to all of us, but I feel like, you know, and I talk a lot about ghosts, I talk a lot about the afterlife, and I was having a conversation the other day, and there is a beauty, and there's a beauty in Gothic architecture. There's a beauty in graveyards. Some graveyards are stunningly beautiful places to be and places to come to remember your loved ones. But it is quite important in amongst all of this talk of Dracula, ghosts, death, dark topics, that you do remember that life is for living, and the joy of being alive is, you know, you have to appreciate the people who are living and around you, as well as remembering those who have departed and celebrating those. So yeah, interesting little tip. And for those of you who've watched Beetlejuice, I think that's kind of quite an important message in that movie as well, that even though Lydia Dietz can communicate with the dead like I can, she still has to prioritize the living people that are around her and that love her and look to her for guidance in a real life, everyday way. Insightful, right? A bit of 4 a.m. wisdom from a rather sleepy, rambling Brocarde. So there you go. Make of that what you will. Live life, live fast. I was going to say die young, but I don't even know if I'm young anymore. Probably not. Probably not. I think I need to get one of those sort of eternal youth vampire potions. Or maybe I just need to turn into a vampire. I mean, I'm definitely in the right place. Definitely. Food for thought. As promised, Whitby Abbey at sunrise. Now, I'm listening hard and I can't quite hear the sound of the crying nun. I can hear the cries of a cockerel, but not quite the same thing, is it? Unless it's a ghost cockerel, but that would be very bizarre. And I know I've sensed wildlife before. So now that the sun is starting to rise, you can actually see the silhouette of Whitby Abbey behind me. When I was trying to run around in the dead of night, trying to find the illumination switch, which I failed miserably in, this is pretty much where I was standing and you could not see a thing. And if you visit here in the daytime, you'll be able to see it in its full glory. But it's still quite special to see it at sunrise when you get that haunting silhouette. And if you think about the ghost stories that are attached to the building, you can let your imagination wander and soak in all of the haunted history. The seagulls are well and truly awake now. They are actually more awake than me. I am wanting to go to sleep right now, to be honest, but the seagulls are starting their day. Now that the dawn is breaking, you can really see the whole view of Whitby. All of the night lights are still on. You can see the fishermen returning from their haul, and yeah, the town is starting to come to life, and the church looks beautiful now. You can see its whole silhouette. The sky is like a beautiful blue colour, deep dark blue, and I highly recommend, if you're coming to Whitby, you absolutely have to wake up for sunrise. Walk up the 199 steps that are behind me and watch the sunrise over Whitby Abbey, over St Mary's Church, and enjoy Whitby from this perspective, like looking down on the small fishing town. That is a brilliant way to start your day. I keep trying to wrap up this video in several ways, and then I keep seeing things that I want to share, because as this turns from the deep dark night into dawn, into sunrise, the whole place changes. So I'm sharing the steps again. I want to go and show you the lighthouse and the view from that end of the graveyard. So stick with me for just a tiny bit longer. So final perspective, I'm still in the churchyard. I'm still in the graveyard. I've been here for a very long time now, and I'm trying to leave, and I keep seeing other things that I want to share. So when you camp here for sunrise, you will look down and you will see the little fishing boats, as I said earlier, going out. You can properly see them for this angle. There's a bench here, you can sit here, bring a hot drink because it's damn cold in October, and you can see the haunted lighthouse. Yes, even the lighthouse in Whitby has a ghost story attached to it. As I was saying, if you enjoyed this, follow, like, subscribe, do all of the above, and share your experiences with me. As always, I love to hear it. So thanks for watching. Bye.